Hi everyone, good morning. I hope you're able to hear me. Can anyone please confirm?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so as part of the demo, we discussed what we're going to cover, what is Azure data engineering that we have come across it, how previously users used to do the ETL data processing that we came across it. So in the initially, we have a Informatica, we have a SSIS in order to do the data processing. And later, due to the big data in the market, this traditional approach was not capable enough to process the data. For that reason, we got Hadoop into the market. So Hadoop was used to provide a solution for the big data, and big data means the data that cannot be stored in your system or the data that cannot be processed by your system is known as a big data. So in order to provide the solution for the big data, we were using Hadoop. And Hadoop also many problems were there, and it was a completely not in-memory processing, and it is a disk-based processing, and performance will be less later some point of years. And it is completely 100% is coding. We have to write too many lines of the code, and it is completely on-prem. So because of all these reasons, later Spark came into the picture, and later age of the Spark, Databricks came into the picture, something like that it happened. And parallelly, from the Microsoft, also they wanted to provide a solution for the big data from the Microsoft, and GCP also providing a solution for big data, and AWS also trying to provide. Out of all these three, the Azure services are the topmost services in the market for data solutions. For data solutions, it is a topmost. Okay, so these people also having the services, but they're not much more concentrated on the data solution side, and we are Microsoft more concentration on the Azure, more concentration on the data. So we are having more openings in the Azure. So Azure data engineers, as a Azure data engineer, we are going to do the data ingestion is one of the primary responsibility, and other responsibility is data transformation. So market is using Azure Data Factory for data ingestion, and market is using Azure Databricks to do the data transformation. So here is the place we are going to talk about the PySpark, Python plus Spark engine. So when you combine both of them, that we can call it as a PySpark. So we are going to take the data from the varieties of the data sources, and we are going to process and keep the data, clean the data at some point of place. So later, the reporting team will consume the data scientists can consume the data analyst teams can consume the data from there. Okay, so from all these people, again, the customers, the original business users are going to use it. So that we discussed more in detail, and to whom it is suitable, that I talked about it. And the prerequisites I have given. This is for learning point of view prerequisites, but for practicing, there are some softwares are required, like SQL Server Management Studio is required. Okay, so I'll walk you through this very soon, how we can set up the environment before talking about the Azure Data Factory. So our major services is Azure Data Factory and Azure Databricks. And what we are providing that I have given here. And one more is missed, that is recording access for 6 months. So recording access also will be provided to you so that you can go through the recording and you can do your practice. If you're not having a recording, then it is highly difficult. So by default, you're going to get the recording access here. Once you subscribe the course, automatically you're going to get a recording access. And what we are going to discuss today is I wanted to brief about cloud computing. So what is this cloud computing? And before that, I just wanted to walk you through the content of the course, what we are going to cover as part of this training. Okay, so what we are going to do that we covered in the last session, in the day one, it's not a day two, it is a day one. So in the day one, we are going to see about cloud computing, and before that, we are going to see what we are going to cover as part of this training. So this course content is going to work even for signups, and signups is going to be decommissioned, guys, because they're planning to migrate towards to the Fabric, because signups is a failed piece. So if you know about this, whatever the content that I'm going to take you through, if you know that, you can also work with the Fabric with minor changes. You can easily adapt. We can easily adapt at the time of working. And even if you're having a projects in the signups also, you can easily work it. So I'll give those differences later. You do not worry about it. And signups is going to be decommissioned very soon. And once this is stabilized, then definitely they're going to take it out. Okay. So in the first, we are going to talk about the basics of the cloud computing. Even, of course, we are going to work as a Azure data engineer, but we need to have some idea about what is this cloud, why we need to go to the cloud. So those details that I'm going to talk as part of basics of cloud, where we are going to have what is on-premise, and what is a cloud, and cloud deployment models. What are the different types of cloud deployment models are there? The types of the services. What are the different types of the services which are providing by cloud vendors? So we have a GCP is a cloud vendor, and AWS is a cloud vendor. Even Microsoft Azure is a cloud vendor. They used to sell their services, their cloud services to the customers. So those we are going to talk about it. So I don't want to spend more time on this because we are not going to be part of administration side. I'm just going to give a basic idea about it. My more concentration on the data. And in order to provide the solution for the big data, we are going to use Microsoft Azure. Since we are going to use Microsoft Azure, we need to know about briefly about Microsoft Azure. So Microsoft Azure introduction, I'm going to take about it and how we can create an account, subscription, resource group, resources, and the best practices for the billing. It is very, very important for us. How we can reduce the billing, especially when we are going to use a paid subscription. For us, in companies and all, we don't need to worry about it. Someone will take care, someone will have the best practices to handle the billing. They're going to review the every month, month by month. They will compare where exactly the bill is coming more. They will take care about it. As we are going to practice, if you are not having a free trial subscription, or if you're having a paid subscription, how we can reduce the cost that I'm going to take you through only for us, not for company. And as I said, in the big data, we have two problems. One is a data storage problem and processing problem. How we are going to store the data. So we need to know about it. We need to have some idea about how exactly we can store the data. So there are two flavors or two platforms are there from the Microsoft Azure in order to store the data. One is Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, another is Azure SQL Server. So these two are the storage platforms. One is ADLS, another is SQL Server. So I'm going to talk about it, how we can set up it. In real time, we are not going to be responsible even setting up this ADLS. We are a consumers. We are going to consume the ADLS. We are going to store the data. We are going to read the data from there. But we do not create a ADLS. We do not create a containers. We do not give any access to anyone. So that those completely activities will be taken care by someone else. But in order to do practice, our aim is to create a data pipelines. Our aim is to create a data pipelines. To create a data pipelines, we need to set up the source, because in companies, in organizations, there will be a specific tool to set up the environment. But here we have to do from our side. For practicing purpose, I'm going to take you through, and not only that, these things will be helpful for certifications. These things will be helpful for DP203 certification. At this point of time, still we're having it. Maybe in the future, um, there may not be DP203. Okay, so certification exams, if you're preparing, then all these things will be helpful. And those things I'm going to take care about. We're going to spend time with the Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 to create, to handle, to maintain the storage. What are the different types of storage types we're having, that we're going to discuss as part of this. In the interviews also, not in the interviews, basically in the HR calls, they used to ask, do you have experience in ADLS? They don't know. HR doesn't know about what is ADLS, but as per the requirement, they're going to ask. So if you're having a clear picture on it, then you can easily say, yes, I'm having experience. When you're working as a data engineer, by default, everyone is going to have a experience with the ADLS Gen 2. Just keep in mind. And other thing is SQL Server. A database is important. So database, how exactly we are going to have it? How exactly we are going to set up it? In the cloud. In the cloud, how we can set up the SQL Server. On-prem, we have a SQL Server, and in the cloud also we have a SQL Server. In what reasons we are using a SQL Server database in the cloud, we are going to discuss as part of this, and the best practices. I experienced one of the best moment with the SQL Server in the Azure. So I'm going to share that details with you. And as I said, as part of in the last demo, we discussed about a prerequisites. In order to work as a data engineer, we need to have a knowledge or experience on the SQL Server. So SQL Server means you need to talk to the database. Your data factory is going to talk to the database. But to talk to the database, you need to understand the SQL. Data Factory is a code-free ETL tool. Data Factory can understand, but in some places, I feel whenever you're going to take the data from the SQL Server, as a data engineer, I recommend you to write a SQL code. You feel that definitely there will be SQL code. We are not going to take a data directly from the table. We used to write a SQL code. 90% chances are there. So as a data engineer, we should know about the SQL also. We cannot ignore the SQL. So I'm going to take care about that. You don't need to worry about it. All these things, whatever is required for Azure data engineer or data engineer, that I'm going to take you through. You don't need to take a training from outside. Even if you take outside, like they're going to give a basics only. But I'm going to cover a little more in detail in terms of working point of view, so that you can feel easily when you see the code. And once that is done, our main journey is going to start from the Azure Data Factory. Our main journey is going to start from the Azure Data Factory. We're going to discuss about what is ELT and what is ETL, what is a data factory architecture. Data factory architecture, we're going to see how exactly it is going to be there. And the components of the data factory. We need to understand what components are there to use the Azure Data Factory. Integration runtimes, link services, data sets, data flows, pipelines, triggers, all these are the introduction of your data factory. So it's completely theory, but they are very, very important. I'm going to explain diagrammatically so that you can understand very easily. And as I said, as a data engineer, we are going to do the main activity that we are going to do. One of the main activity is data ingestion. The data ingestion is going to be happened by using this copy data activity. So when the moment you are using a copy data, make sure that it's a ingesting. You're ingesting the data from one place to another place. We are going to spend a lot of time with the copy data activity. In many of the 80% of the places in the data ingestion, you're going to see the copy data activity. And then we're going to talk about the variable activity in order to create a metadata driven pipelines. This is very, very important, guys. Metadata driven pipelines. Everyone can create a pipeline, but metadata driven pipelines are important. So dynamic pipeline, when you create a pipeline, that pipeline should work as a framework. So when I say framework, that can be useful for multiple places, by multiple projects. Even I came across that kind of things. So when you create a solution, that solution should be useful by others also. So that kind of pipelines, we can call it as a metadata driven pipelines. So in order to do that, you have to control by using control tables, and control tables are going to have a metadata. Control tables are going to have a metadata. For that reason, we are calling them as a metadata driven pipelines. So to handle this, then definitely we need to have a variable activity, lookup activity, many things are there. A dynamic thing, dynamic pipelines, also we can also call them as dynamic pipelines. So one of the activities very, very important in order to handle this metadata driven, that is variable activity. We are going to see how exactly we can use this. And then we have a get metadata activity. If you're having a file system, and this is also one of the activity in order to get the file system details. Is file existed? Is file having a data? And all these things. Is folder existed? Those things we can get it with the help of get metadata activity. And then later we are going to discuss about the filter activity in order to restrict the number of items from the metadata table or control table. We are going to use the filter activity. And lookup activity, it is very, very, very important. There is no project without lookup activity, or there is no data ingestion without lookup activity. So that much important it is. So we are going to discuss about it. This is very important for when you read the data from the multiple objects, multiple tables. So if you're going to make it dynamic, if you're going to make a metadata driven, then lookup activity is very, very important. So how we can use this and what are the limitations of this? We are going to discuss more in detail about lookup activity. And the next very important activity is for each activity. If someone is there with SSIS, we used to call that as a for each container. The same for each container will be is same to same as your for each activity. There is only one difference. That difference, I'll talk about it. So this is also is very, very important. So whenever we have a framework, definitely there is a for each activity. So we cannot say, no, I didn't use for each activity in my experience. Everyone has to use it. Everyone has to come across for each activity. And then if condition activity also, if there is anything, I came across this, guys, in a situation that I'll explain about that situation, where exactly I came across if condition activity. I'll talk about it. It's like a generic condition. Most of you maybe come across it in many places when you have experience with SQL or when you have experience with any programming language. There is a condition. If this condition is satisfied, go with this, and if this condition is filled, and go with others. So that kind of functionality maybe come across it in many places. And then we are going to talk about the delete activity. So there is a less chances to use the delete activity, but I'll walk you through that. And switch activity, I did not come across this switch activity in my experience, but still I'll walk you through that. And later, very important is execute pipeline activity. When you go for data orchestration, when you're going to do data orchestration without execute pipeline activity, you cannot do it. Or when you're creating a framework, definitely you need to have a execute pipeline activity. And if you're having a loop inside a loop, definitely you required execute pipeline activity. We are going to talk about it more in detail about this execute pipeline activity. And then another important activity is stored procedure activity. If you have a database in the cloud or in the on-prem, most of the times what you're going to do is like reading is fine. Your underlying data sources is fine. Those sources are going to have only reading access. But when it comes to in our environment also, we required a database. So why we required is to handle metadata driven, to have a metadata or to have a log. Logging also is required, right? When this task is started, when this task is ended. If it is failed, then why it is failed. Those kind of details, we can call them as a logging. So logging we can handle by keeping them in the SQL server, either mostly in the cloud database. We don't keep in on-prem. We are going to come out of on-prem. So definitely you are going to have a database in the cloud. So in order to handle this logging details, we can use the stored procedure activity. This is one of the approach. There is one more approach is also there, data lake. In the data lake also we can keep the log. So when you go for data lake, we don't need to go for stored procedure activity. It is going to be decommissioned from our project. So in my case, we are using stored procedure activity in order to maintain the logging details. In my previous project, I came across with the data lake to handle the log. They don't want to write a stored procedures. So in order to handle the log, they need to write a notebook. By using the notebook, we can handle the log. By using the stored procedure also, we can handle the log. So I'll walk you through how we can handle in both the options so that you don't feel difficulties at the time of working. And there is one more activity, that is until activity. I came across this in my current project when I go for data orchestration process. And validation activity is also there is a chances, but I didn't come across this. Until activity I came across in my experience. I'll walk you through where exactly I came across it. And then the fail activity, this one also I used in my project. So if you want to fail the activity based on your intention, then we need to have a fail activity. So up to all here is data ingestion. And from here, data transformation, the second responsibility of Azure data engineer is going to start from here. So this is just give a 10% priority, but 90% priority, I recommend you to give it to notebooks. Even if you don't know about this data flow, no one feel about it in the interview. But if you say, I don't know notebook, I don't know Databricks, if you say 90% chances are going to lose. So notebooks are very, very, very important. So I'm going to cover this. If you have any brand new projects, if they're going to handle the data transformation with the Azure Data Factory, then it will be helpful. In my entire 7 years of Azure data engineering experience, I did not come across with the data flow to transform the data. I came across with the stored procedures and I came across with the notebook. And this is not recommended. It's a worst approach, but it was there in one of my starting career of the project. So later they migrated to the notebooks. Okay, it's a different story, but this is very, very, very important. And once this data flow activity is completed, this is very, very important. We need to work as a team to collaborate your stuff. We need to have a repository. Code repository is very much common for every software, every work in the market, not only not specific to data factory. If you're working for .NET, then a repository is required. If you're working for Java, repository is required. Or if you're working for SQL, repository is required. For everything is required. In the same way, for data factory also, a repository is required. So usage of the repository in the .NET little different. In Java, approach is different. In the same way here also, the approach is different. But the purpose of the repository is very much common across all the places. To collaborate your work, we're going to use the repository. To save our code, to share our code, we are going to use this code repository. As part of this code repository, to explain, I covered here SCD type 1 implementation with the data factory and SCD type 2 implementation with the data factory. So here how we can create a PR, pull request, how we can create a pull request, and how we can merge the code with the collaboration branch that we're going to see. So once you work with that, then we feel it is very, very simple. And then I told you, when you go for data transformation, it is always recommended to use Databricks. I kept your data flow not more than 10% as priority. I gave, if you ask me, I'll give 100% priority to Databricks only. If you know Databricks, you can work with any of the data engineering services in the market. You just imagine, if you're going to if you're going to work in AWS, then Databricks will be there. And if you're going to work with GCP, Databricks will be there. If you go from Microsoft Fabric, Databricks will be there. So Databricks is the heart of the data engineers. So the Databricks introduction, here we're going to discuss about what is a big data, what is a distributed file systems, and about that HDFS, DBFS, and ADLS. HDFS means Hadoop Distributed File System, and Databricks file system. Databricks also, they have their own file system. And ADLS, Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2, we already going to discuss in the initial stage of our data engineering course. Then how we are going to create a Databricks, the types of the clusters. In the interview, they're going to ask what type of clusters we're having, and when we are going to use this cluster and that cluster. There is a chances to ask in the interview. So we are going to discuss about it. How we are going to manage the clusters. So managing the clusters, creating the clusters is really not our jobs. But in the interview, they're going to ask. So we are going to see them. And once that is done, in order to go for main data bricks to talk about data transformation, we need to understand Python. Python is very, very important. If you understand Python, you can easily work with the Databricks. And Python is like a ocean. You don't need complete Python. We need only core Python. We need only core Python because we are not going to work as a data scientist, or we are not going to work as a Python developers. We are going to work as a Azure data engineers. So whatever is required for us, that I'm going to cover. So I've given here this entire Python. We are going to practice with Databricks Community Edition. How we can set up the environment, we are going to see. And then I told you notebook, variables, data types, type conversion, typecasting is important. What are the collection types are there? That means advanced data types, primitive data types. All those things we are going to see here. Of course, even dictionaries, operators, conditional statements, how we can control the flow of execution. And loops are important. Loops are important. And in Data Factory, I came across as part of this content is for each activity. The for each activity and for loop both are same. And if condition activity and conditional statements both are same. You can feel the comparison. And string operations, when you have a strings, how you can handle it. List operations, tuple operations, set operations. These are all important. Especially list is very, very important for us. When you're going to work with the RDDs in the Databricks, all this stuff is important. And Lambda functions are very, very important for RDD. The approach of Lambda functions. So if we can understand something here, understanding of this RDD data, resilient distributed data set. So you can easily understand this RDD. And once this Python basics is completed, this is out of the Databricks. It's not part of the Databricks. And Databricks, main Databricks is going to start from here. For Data Factory, copy activity is there in order to copy a data from one place to another place. So for Databricks also is required. Databricks is also required, but this is not for data ingestion. This is for data transformation. So we are going to see them DB utils, the varieties of the utils we are having, how we can copy a file from one place to another place, how we can create a directory, and how we can move a file from one place to another place. So I told you, if you have a, let's say for example, the age of the file is 5 years, then remove that. If you do with the Data Factory, you have to do it too many steps. But if you do the same thing with the Databricks, it's just 2 or 3 lines of the code. So when I explain about this Databricks, you feel Databricks is much more easier than the Data Factory. You feel that if you really practice with me, if you really did, definitely you feel that. So that we are going to see as part of this. This is completely DBFS, Databricks file system. How we can handle the Databricks file system, that we are going to see. And then transformation is going to start from here. So Azure Databricks, RDD we are having. how we can do the data transformation, what is the lazy evaluation, definitely there will be questions. So narrow transformations, why transformations, or what are the different types of transformations, what is the data lineage, they may ask. So they will ask you to write a code also in the interview. They will ask you to share your screen and they will ask you to write a code. So if you can follow with me, definitely you can write a Databricks code for their task. They don't give a bigger, they will give a small. So I'm also going to take you through the interview questions, how we can write a code for them. And varieties of the transformations we're having: map transformations, flat map transformation, filter. And there is 100% a question from this. What is coalesce and what is repartition? Okay, so and how can we get how many partitions are there in the data frame or in the RDD? All those things we are going to get. And how we can, this is the very first program that we are going to do is word count program. If we can understand this, then understanding other transformations is going to be much more easier. So by the time of starting this, you are going to be aware of transformation concepts as part of the data factory. So when I'm going to talk as part of the Databricks, you feel easy. So that we are going to see. So market is not using much more the data, this one RDD, resilient distributed data set, because it's difficult. The earlier age of Databricks, they they came up the initial days of Databricks, or when it is origin, they came with the RDD only. It's a what I can say, the core of Databricks. Understanding of this RDD is a little difficult. So because of that reason, the Databricks came with another approach, that is a data frame. So data frame everyone can understand. If you understand the data factory, then understanding this data frame is simple. Or if you understand the SQL, understanding of the data frame is simple. You can feel that when I'm going to explain about, even if you see this content of this course, you can understand what we are going to do it. So how we can create a data frame? By reading data from the file system, or by reading data from Python object or from RDD. How we can do it? We are going to see that. So this is very important. 80 to 90% of the market using data frame concept only. High level API. Low level API is RDD. High level API is data frame. So here varieties of the transformations I have given here. And there is one more thing that I wanted to say: broadcasting. It is very important. It's 100% interview question. And after completion of this data frame, the people who are much more interested with the Python coding, Python style of the coding, they will go for the data frame. Okay. And there are few people, they are much more having experience with the SQL. So they will go with the Python plus SQL. Wherever is required Python, they will use, and wherever they required, they will use SQL also. So that we can call it as a Spark SQL. The Spark SQL is very important, because we are going to have a delta tables. So when you're dealing with the delta tables, the SQL is very important. This is also came is because there are many traditional ETL developers were there. So because of that reason, the Databricks came up with the SQL also. So that means in the content I've shown you, there is a SQL. That SQL is very helpful at the time of this Spark SQL. If you understand the SQL, then understanding the Spark SQL is just nothing. And then finally, we're going to talk about this real-time project. This real-time project is very important to work in the real time. So I'm going to spend around 20 days with this only, irrespective of the course. So because of that reason, it will go 3 months of the course. So once you are completed, you feel that you're having a real-time experience on it. The entire training will be based on real-time approach. 80 to 90% is practical things only will be there. And so any question about the content? There may be something that I may add it here. Okay, so if you have any doubt specific to content, you can reach out me. So the main intention of this training is everyone should get the job. Even the interview questions also, I'm going to talk how we can write a code for that particular interview question. And I have questions. I collected questions. I'm going to talk to them and I will give to them. I will give to you. Okay, so that's all about this content. And let me give some brief idea about today's session, because most of the time I spent with this walking you through the content, the detailed explanation I just talked about it. So as part of this content, we have in the first, we are going to talk about the cloud computing. So tomorrow also I'm going to talk about the cloud computing, as we spent most of the time with the content. So what is this on-prem? Why we need to go for the cloud? First question. Forget about why we need to go for data factory. In the demo, we discussed about it. I have a traditional ETL projects. I wanted to migrate them into the cloud for better performance, for reducing the cost. Ignore about this. Ignore about our demo session for time being. For time being, just concentrate why we need to go to the cloud. That is the first question. So in order to know that, first you need to understand what is this on-prem. As a layman, I wanted to talk here. Let's say, for example, I wanted to start a restaurant. I wanted to start a restaurant. So in order to start the restaurant, what we required? We required building is required, right? Building is required, and you just imagine I have 1 lakh INR, Indian rupees. With 1 lakh, I wanted to start my business. Just imagine I'm there in a small town and I need a building. And apart from that, what we required? We required infrastructure. Furniture is required. Furniture is required. And manpower is required. Electricity is required. And security is required. Okay. And what else? Material also is common wherever it is. Material is common. So at the higher level, we require all these things, and cooling system is also required. Without cooling system, you cannot start restaurant. Just take a 10 LR, 10 L INR. So $1 million. If you have this, if I wanted to start a business, I need to have all these things. I need to have all these things. So for building itself, we are going to spend a lot of amount. Just imagine 6L is required at least for this building, furniture, manpower. So manpower is fine. Every month we are going to, it's like a salaries, right? Month by month you are going to give. It's a repeated cost. Electricity power, that is also repeated cost. Security is a repeated cost. Material is also repeated cost. Cooling system is one time investment. Okay, so there are one-time investments and there are repeated items also, repeated costing items also is there. So in order to do this, you just imagine I require 10L. If I don't have a 1 million, then I cannot start my business. If I have this, then for setting up itself is going to sufficient amount for me. But what about run and maintenance? It's difficult. Then we can take in another example for this. So this is one I wanted to say. And we have another approach, that is renting. We can also go for renting, right? I hope everyone with me. So when you go for renting the building, the cost is going to be, it's a rent. Okay, just imagine here I'm just taking 6L and here I'm just taking 1L and here I'm just taking, just imagine 10K or something like that, 20K, 30K, 1L, rest of the amount. I'm just weak on the calculation, so I just kept rest of the amount. So more spending is happening here, building and furniture. So 7 lakhs is going to complete here itself. But if I go with the rent, what happens is you're not going to pay, you're not going to spend that much amount. You're going to pay rent, just imagine 10K. Monthly rent is 10K. Furniture, no, not required. Or they already having a furniture for the restaurant. So we don't need to have it. The everything is coming under the rent only. And manpower is required. Same as it is. No changes in the manpower. Electricity bill is also same. Even this is also 20K is not, we are not going to get, we are going to get hardly this one. Even this setup also is required. But here we don't need to set up, everything will be there. We are going to just pay the current bill. So security is required, same, no changes for this. And material is required, no changes. And cooling system not required to spend, because this will come with the bill, with the a building owner. So that means we are depending on someone else. We are not spending, we are not spending our own amount. So if the business succeeded, then it is fine. If the business is not even succeeded, the loss of this is less when you compare with this. So whatever is there in your premises, whatever is there in your premises, in your within your own premises, that we can call it as a on-prem. Whatever is there with someone else premises, that we can call it as a cloud. As simple as that. I can give one more example also. Let's say I'm the person staying in Hyderabad. Okay. So if I need a power to my home, I'm not going to have a power station. I'm not capable enough to have a power station for my home. Your power station is a cloud. Power station is a cloud because it is not in your premises. And power station is controlled by the state government of Telangana, right? So we are consuming the power by just connecting our wires, our cables. So this power station is a cloud. We are not buying, we are not controlling, we're just consuming it. So we're taking a rent. I can give like this, I can give many examples. I have some work in the Bangalore. I wanted to stay 1 month. For 1 month, is it possible to buy a house? It's highly difficult. So what you are going to do, you're going to stay in the hotel. You're just going to pay a rent for them. So that means hotel is a cloud. Your own house is a on-prem. So that means for whatever the reason, you're using it and then you're giving it back to them. In the same way, the cloud also is the same to same. The same thing you can apply to the cloud systems. Whatever is there in your premises, that we can call it as a cloud. Sorry, we can call it as an on-prem. In your premises is known as on-prem. Whatever is there in someone else's premises is known as cloud. So market is much more interested on the cloud. Market is much more interested on the cloud because people are not interested to spend a lot of things. Even here, the security also come like if you take a rent someone some in some places they will provide all the security also. In the same way, the cloud providers also is going to provide the services to the users with very less cost. Okay, so here is the place the data centers came into the picture, and we are going to talk about the cloud deployment models. What are the different types of cloud deployment models are there that we are going to discuss on tomorrow. So I'm stopping here and I'm going to talk little more details about it. And day after tomorrow, our Azure is going to start. This is the main course from here. Any question, guys, before stopping? Any question? Able to unmute yourself? I hope. Okay. Okay, then if you're not having any question, we'll see on tomorrow. Thank you for joining.